Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
Mike Freeman, are you ready for another episode of the Richest Men in Town? I mean, it's Thursday. We might as well.
Am I
right?
ready? Do you understand what's on the altar of sacrifice, right?
I do understand.
You understand how much I love you and how much I love hanging out with you and your friends. Like, here's the thing. You go to Mike Freeman 5 years ago, it was like, hey, Thursday night football, division rivalry. You're going to hang out for a couple hours, talk to a dude you've never even met.
See you later. This was a test of all things, and I appreciate you.
And not only that, but our guest is a diehard Seahawks fan.
Diehard Seahawks fans.
There's no video, right? But I mean, the guy, like if our listeners could see, we're talking like he had the beanie.
I think we'll post a screenshot.
We gotta do that.
I mean,
we gotta do that.
There was some epic gear.
There was some fandom. There was some fandom going on.
There was definitely some fandom going on.
Kory Angelsey crushed it, boys.
It was a fun night. What stood out to you in the conversation with Kory?
Well, I just love battle-tested wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So we've had some people on that have we've had some guests on the show that have served in the military, and I just love what comes out of their mouth. I love the way they look at life. I love the way, hey, if you're not hitting, adjust fire.
Yeah.
I kind of dig that. Control the weather.
Yeah.
Right. Like take everything, that extreme ownership. And I just think, man, he had some pretty powerful moments in his sequence. His journey doesn't follow any formula. It just shows that there is no formula, right? Who goes to boot camp and then goes to and serves a church mission?
It's so crazy. Yeah.
Kory does.
Very crazy. Kory does. Yeah. Yeah. I just thought that I agree with you that the journey was definitely different from any of our other guests. And there was, it's funny though. We say this a lot, right? There's a lot of differences between all of our guests, but at the core of it, right? There's a lot of similarities. This, the struggle. We started tonight. We talked a little bit about leaning into adversity, and Kory really sort of he is one that really defines that. He talks about some of the things that he dealt with as a young boy
that made him who he was today.
And and he talks about how difficult those things were, but they shaped him. And I thought it was great to be able to hear that. It put me in a position where I really was, as he was talking, sort of taking inventory of experiences and trying to identify what was the defining moment for me in those adversities. Because
let's not. This is not a spoiler. We'll call it a trailer, right?
Yeah, right.
Boy grows up in Spokane. He even says after a whole lot of free lunches from McDonald's, he gets talked into a Army reservist, ends up serving in South America in a mission for his church, ends up Mr. I don't date online meets the girl of his dreams online, ends up serving in Afghanistan and loving people.
Yeah. I mean, it really is, there's sort of this juxtaposition of the hardness of the military and the softness of Kory's heart, right? I just really felt like that was on display tonight, with some of the lessons that he learned that were difficult, and then some of the tender mercies and the tender moments that he was able to be a part of, being in those very difficult things.
Yeah, that boot camp mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. He referred to that a lot. Yeah.
Boot camp mentality. There will be an end to the suffering, and the suffering has a purpose.
Right. I think knowing the outcome of the game makes the game a little bit easier. Right. And
spoken from a really hard place. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Which gives it all the more credibility.
Yeah.
Super easy in fair weather to say, oh no, we got this.
That's right.
You're on the other side of the planet in a hostile environment where in the back of your brain, you've got a million things going on for your own safety. And you're trying to build relationships of trust with people and learn their language.
Yeah, it really is a miraculous journey. It's a marvelous journey. And
it's a rich life.
It's a rich life. And I
found
really
another one.
I think there's no shortage, Mike Freeman. I'm looking forward to what we unearth next week. But for now, I hope our guests listen to Kory Angelsey, take some notes, understand that richness can be found anywhere, and enjoy your time with Kory Angelsey on The Richest Man in Town.
Yeah, about what? That's my question for you.
Oh man, dude, how crazy is that I texted you and I said, Chris Taylor's got to do something big right here, and boom, there it went.
And I texted back like that.
I know. It's crazy. Funny thing is, Ricky was like, she's a good sport. She watches the Dodger games with me, and she bailed out on that one. She's upstairs. She's like, this game's boring, man. It's 1-1. And then I was just losing my mind after that one. Losing it.
You had to be sweating bullets.
Oh, dude, I did not want that thing to go to extras. I was like, but if there's ever a dude that you want, I mean, I would have loved to see Pujols hit that. Because that would have been crazy.
That was the Hollywood script.
Yeah, that would have been crazy. But a guy who's going 8 for 72,
mashed it.
He did. He got a hold of it. I thought it was going to be a double, man. But
so many times, Tyler, I really think that we need a Richest Men in Town sports spinoff. You know what I mean? So here's what I'm saying: take the principles of Richest Men in Town.
Yeah.
Right. And we know we got this, right? We know what it takes. Now, do we implement? Do we execute?
Yeah.
Right. But I'm challenged. You take all of those things that embody that rich man, rich woman lifestyle, and then you say former Cubby Chris Bryant's on the Giants. And I'm like, screw that guy. I'm yelling at my TV, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All the good feelings.
Ow. Yeah, I can turn on someone real quick in a sport.
No, but how about all this, right? How many times do we say on this show, man, it's about the journey. It's not about, don't judge someone at their worst. And then you're yelling at the TV. Come on, you freaking bum.
Oh, yeah. I can't tell you how many times I yelled.
It reminds me of Holland, checking our religion at the door sometimes. I got to work on that.
Yeah, well, you know what? When Cody Bellinger comes to the plate, I use a lot of the word bum a lot, come on, man.
Why are you changing? Why is he changing his swing?
Dude, he has been horrible this year.
Because he's changing his swing.
I mean, but when he hit that, when he was the MVP, he had a different stance. And I think
that upright. He's holding the umbrella, man. That's how he's a coach's kid, isn't he?
Yeah, but the difference with him is open and closed. He tried, so he's going back to that closed stance. And
don't mess.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm like, do something, dude, because sub 200 is not doing it for me. You know what I mean? It's just not doing it for me. Hey, let me ask you this question. I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was talking about
Not ours.
I mean, that's usually the only one I have on repeat. I just listen.
Mistake number one.
I know. And
I will not judge you at your worst.
All right, thank you. They said it was about the whole premise of this episode of this show that I was listening to was embarrassing moments. All right, and it had these people, and they were airing their most embarrassing moments. But one of the things that it said was, our embarrassing moments can reveal our blind spots. So I don't know. I was kind of thinking about that. Like interesting.
Well, hold on. Like,
yeah.
Do you have some blind spots? I think we all do.
Oh yeah. Like I'm certain of it, right? I mean, there's things that I do that I'm certain are that I'm not sure that they're that
our most embarrassing moments
can reveal our blind spots.
I think I can get behind that. I think I can get behind that.
It kind of resonated with me as I was listening to it. I was kind of thinking like, all right, think of some of the moments that you've had that have been embarrassing, and they've sort of expose. They tend to tear away this facade or this other identity that we build, and there you are, like standing in your chonies, looking at the crowd, right? I mean. I
can tell you right now, one of the benefits of being an oversharer is it's pretty hard to have an embarrassing moment, right? I try to kind of live like, hey, it is what it is. But it is.
Okay, I totally agree. But this is the other thing they said, that we tend to share these embarrassing moments in a public forum in a self-deprecating manner without giving the context as to why we're probably trying to cover up something, right? So, for instance, right? I mean, when I was like 16 years old, probably, I had my first car was a full-size van, painted the color blue like a Smurf. Is that a reference that people even know? I don't know.
We'll drop it in the show notes, man. You got your Smurfs.
All right. So I'm driving to a church event for a bunch of teenage kids. It was a fireside, right, at someone's house. Happened to be garbage day that day, so there was cans pulled out inside the gutter, right, sitting by the curb. I pull into this cul-de-sac in my big full-size van with a bunch of my buddies, turning the wheel to make the U-turn of the cul-de-sac, and this van had a tendency to stall now and again, okay? It does it in the middle of my turn. Power steering goes out. I proceed to plow through a row of trash cans in front of probably 20 people standing in the front lawn. All right.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And granted, I got to tell you, I was 16 years old. Like the only thing I wanted to do was somehow impress a girl, right? Even though I'm in a Smurf van, and I just run over all these trash cans. I got the car started and I just drove away. Okay. Left the cans spread all over for someone else to deal with, and I left.
Do you think do you think that there's somebody who knew it was you and is walking around this planet right now with that idea of Tyler Gould in their head?
Yeah, like 30 people that were standing in the front yard. That car was unmistakable. It was me. It was 100% unmistakable. And so I tell that story sometimes and I laugh about it. I think it's funny and people think it's funny, but the reality is I was terrified of what someone was going to think of me, and I wanted to have a good impression when I pulled into even though my stupid car was the dumbest, ugliest thing you ever saw, I wanted to be a cool guy, pull in, park the car, get out, like you've seen in the 80s movies, right? You're this. But no, I was that other dude, drove away. We laughed. Everyone thought it was hilarious as I'm driving away. But inside, dude, I swear I think I was crying because I had just. So anyway, right? I mean,
revealing blind spots.
Right. So I don't know, man. Blind spots. And I think I'm still kind of trying to overcome that blind spot a little bit, Yeah,
you know what I'm starting to realize? Like I in my mind, I have this idea that I don't have an ego.
Okay.
And I'm starting to realize that I might be a freaking egomaniac.
All right.
And you know what it is?
Yeah. Go for it.
It's Thursday nights, Tyler Gould. It's like this podcast, this platform has got me thinking that I got something to say in every circumstance, in every situation. It's like, you know what? Sometimes like I need to step back. I shared something with you, right? I shared with like this Focus on the Family has this serial videos of cherishing your wife.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm thinking like they make this analogy that the wife is the ballerina in the ballet. That's what everyone comes to see. Dude, get in the background. Do everything you can. Cherish your wife. Do everything you can to make sure she's in the spotlight. I got to work on that.
You know, that's
I love me the spotlight, Tyler Gould.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I was watching a comedian that was talking about relationships, and in part of this rant on relationships that this comedian was going through, he kind of paused for a minute and he stopped and talked about his own breakup of his relationship, his recent marriage. And he said, sometimes I have to remind myself that this isn't a contest, that sometimes there, someone has to play the tambourine in the band, and it's okay if I'm just playing the tambourine. And I think maybe that's it, right? Maybe sometimes we just feel like you got to be the lead singer all the time.
Yeah, I think I need to learn that lesson, right? Like I can honestly say, when Kelly and I walk into a social space, I gotta step back.
Yeah,
I gotta get in that back row, right? I gotta accentuate. She's an amazing woman, and everyone loves her. Like I gotta just like, I think I suck all the air out of the room. So I'm coming to this realization right here in front of our thousands of listeners, Tyler Gould.
Yeah. So look, maybe we don't even want to go down this road, but I'll ask the question anyway, and you can defer this to another time. But
I might be punting.
Yeah,
like my Seahawks tonight.
That's right. Where does that come from? Right? Because what is that attached to where you walk in a room and you think, all right, everybody, here I am. It's time for you to enjoy some Mike Freeman time.
Are you ready to blow? Are you ready to have your mind blown?
I'm ready to have my mind blown. Yeah.
What if I told you that I have personal witness that many times extroverts are introverts stuck in a role they think they have to play?
Oh, I 100% agree with that. 100%.
If you went up to people and said, is Mike Freeman extrovert, introvert? They'd say extrovert.
Yeah.
For whatever circumstance, I like to please people. I do care way too much about what people think about me. And I think they think I'm an extrovert.
Yeah.
So lights on.
Well, 100%. I always tell, like, if people ask me that extrovert introvert question, I feel my answer is usually I'm an introvert that acts like an extrovert. Yeah.
And if I walked in and I went into introvert mode and I just went in, and because I admire the quiet.
Yeah.
Right. I admire those Doug McMullins who are.
You kind of want to make a beeline to them and talk to them.
Yeah. They're stewing on things and they're like, and they're deep in thought. And then when they speak, it's like, oh man.
Yeah.
Right. Like I admire that. I want to be that. If I walked into a social setting and that was happening, people would be like, what's going on, Mike? You got COVID over there? You sick?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we have these roles that we're stuck in. It's like we're typecast.
Yeah. All right. So we'll let the where does it come from question stew. But then, so the next question is, what do you got to do to break free from the role? I mean, is it just as simple as next time you go out, just sit there silently with a pensive look on your face? I don't know, man.
With some duct tape on my mouth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly think that there's something refreshing about that. Like I'm actually going to go way back in the Wayback Machine. Long time ago, Tyler, you shared a post. We talk about how this podcast started out as a blog post. It started out as a blog a long time ago. And I remember one of your early blog posts was about blowing up the box. Sometimes that sounds refreshing to me.
Yeah.
Like, what if everything people knew about you changed, or you could present evidence to the contrary.
Yeah.
Right? Because we get into these scripts and we get into these almost like the code that we're telling ourselves. You know, it's like, well, yeah, what if I was a different dad? Yeah, you got a dad script in your head that this is what you do. What if I'm gonna run a different script? You got a husband script. No, what if I'm about cherishing my wife, right? What if I'm about bringing my 100, she brings her 100? I love what you're saying about it not being a competition.
Yeah.
What if I just started implementing some of those changes? Like, I think it'd blow people away, but you know what I think it would too? I don't think people believe people can change.
Well, and that's an interesting thought, because right, we started this podcast and these conversations that you and I have had for years before podcasts or blogs, right? About how do we change, and how do we make adjustments? How do we become better? And at the end of the day, I mean, I think that maybe I'm not looking at all of the things that need to be changed, right? You talk about blowing up the box and changing the perception and changing the role. I mean, I'm looking at myself and saying, well, shoot, I should read this more, or I should spend more time in meditation, or but maybe I just need to change how I'm interacting with people. Maybe I need to change that.
Can I share with you? I'm going to geek out, and you can totally cut this. You're our master sound editor. You can totally cut this if you want, right? This is going to go way deep into a rabbit hole.
All right. I love rabbit holes.
You know, I've been obsessing about a scoreboard. Yes. By the way, scoreboard 237.6. And I did not get my ministering visit done.
Hey,
the challenge was get the ministering visit done with Abe. Abe Freeman is this social guy. He's never around. I'm not blaming him. I got to be better. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a new system that I'm implementing.
I love it. Let's hear it, man.
Are you ready?
I'm ready, man.
So Monk Manual, props to Monk Manual, right?
Monk Manual,
Moleskin, Spirit Journal, all of those things. I need something on me at all times, right?
Okay.
Going 3x5 card.
I like it.
On the non-line side of the 3x5 card, 3-minute timer in the morning after prayer. What do I need to do today? Just a dump.
I mean, we're talking just
work, personal.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So then timer stops, turn the card over on the line side, prioritize them.
Okay.
Number 1, number 2, number 3, right? Then, so let's say I've been coming up with 12 or 13 things I got to do.
Okay.
Number 1, let's say I got 12. On the far right side of the card, the number 1 thing gets 12 points if you do it.
Okay.
The number 2 gets 11. The number 3 gets 10. The last thing on your list gets 1 point. Then you're keeping score, and it's like a batting average, because at the end of the day, I calculate how many points were possible and how many I got, and it's actually working. It's actually working to do crazy. Right. It's actually working professionally.
Yeah.
It's working personally.
I like it, man. I like it a lot.
Yeah. It's not my idea. I will drop whoever gave me that idea into the show notes. It was a personal productivity article that I read. That's my geek out. But like the idea, I know we've talked about scoreboards before. We've talked about change before. Actually putting some things down that Mike Freeman wouldn't necessarily do and throwing a point total to it might actually help. Like today, Mike Freeman packed a lunch.
Nice.
No, this is Mr. Like, I'm going to go to Carl's and get a double Western bacon cheeseburger. They're so good.
They're so good, man.
This episode's brought to you by the double Western bacon cheeseburger and the crisp cut fries at Carl's Jr.
Stop.
Oh,
I haven't had that in so long. It's painful.
Instead, Mike Freeman packed a lunch. And not only did I pack a lunch, not Wonder Bread, bro, Ezekiel bread.
That's good stuff, actually.
Ezekiel bread. I'm gaining a testimony of it. It's flourless.
Yeah. It's good stuff. I'm a fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and a cucumber. Mike Freeman
that seems
had
over
a
the top.
bread sandwich and a cucumber for lunch.
Dang, things are changing over there.
Well, no, come on. They're not. The heart's got to change, right?
Yeah, but sometimes you gotta start somewhere, Mike. You gotta start somewhere. And maybe when we force ourselves to do some of these things, eventually, like you said, you get a testimony of it, man. You're like, you know what? That cucumber in my lunch, I have a testimony of that. Every day I'm doing a cucumber. Hey, look, if Eric Goss can do 29 years of PB&J, Mike Freeman can do 30 days of a cucumber.
We shall see. We shall see. Let's just say people at work were like, hey,
who's this guy?
Who's this guy?
Hey, you know what? And if you walked in with a lunch and didn't say a word, just pensive, thoughtful Mike Freeman sitting in the back.
Chewing on the inside of my lip. Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah. Just pondering the deeper things of life.
Well, can we address the elephant in the room?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is how much I love the richest man in town, because freaking Russell Wilson in his gorgeous neon greens, color rush uniforms.
Yeah.
Hosting the LA Rams tonight on NFL football.
Yes.
And I'm with you, brother.
You are making sacrifices, and I appreciate it. And well, let me just say this. Tonight we have a guest whose name is Kory Angelsey, and he too is a diehard Seattle Seahawks fan, and he too is sacrificing his time in front of the tube to spend a little bit of time with us, man. So,
man, that is admirable.
I've got to
be here. You know what I mean? I've got to be here.
You're right.
It's duty. Duty calls. This guy
right.
answers the call, checks the calendar, sees what's happening, and is like, yeah, I'll hang out with you guys instead.
Kory Angelsey is that kind of guy. He is a guy that is all about duty and doing the right thing. And I love that. He is a service member, and maybe that extends to all things, even going to a podcast, huh?
Yeah. Well, I don't mean to be like the gospel of Russell Wilson, but
yeah. Okay.
Caught a little pregame. Russell Wilson, huge, mad respect for Russell Wilson. And he's actually talking about embracing adversity. They're way underdogs tonight. It's not supposed to, like, if you play it out, like people are saying, all the pundits, all the talking heads, Rams are going to roll. Russell Wilson embraces adversity. And I'm thinking, that's richest man in town right there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw Sam Borquez guest a couple episodes ago. He dropped something on Facebook the other day, kind of blew my mind. We're into this phrase, lean into it. We've actually used that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Lean into it. Lean into the process. Yeah. I think that's an Alan Michael boasting.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But he used the reference, lean into it like sharpening a knife.
Yeah, I liked that. I thought that was very, very
right.
Good.
You take that, you lean into it, and you let that adversity just kind of not blunt, right? Lean into it so that you get that edge. And I just thought that was pretty fantastic.
I love it. Yeah. Well,
Sam Borquez, brilliant.
Sam Borquez was brilliant. And I think tonight, Kory Angelsey is going to teach us a thing or two, much like Sam Borquez did. And I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to our time with Kory. And so why don't we just kick the doors open, let him in, and see what he's got to say about life. And I'm going to attempt to not give score updates throughout the.
Oh, I'm going to get the game cast going. You know what I'm saying?
You better keep it under wraps, man. We've already been threatened in our pre-show call of the sacred nature of the Seahawks score.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about, Kory. Kory Angelsey, welcome to the richest man in town, brother. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. That's what I'm talking about.
Go Hawks, and you're rocking the color rush.
Totally.
Love
you got the 12, which I have a friend.
I've got a closet full, right? I got the 12. I've got we got a Russ. I've got a Steve Largent just to prove that I'm not a bandwagon guy.
That's good proof.
Yeah. people are like, "Who's that?" I'm like, "Come on. Check the Hall of Fame."
Is there a Rick Meyer in there? I don't know. Was he a Seahawk or no? I don't know.
We had the Boz too.
That's true.
Those were days. Those were days. I can tell you that Russell Wilson has never had a 3-game losing streak, and I find that impressive because I can remember some stretches as Seahawk fans where those came all the time.
Definitely. Yep.
Those were the norm.
They're doing to me what they did to me what the Mariners are doing now. We're over 20 years now without a playoff.
Oof.
Yeah, I think about you and Nate Ward, man. You guys were so close. I thought you were going to sneak into that post game or that postseason. But
I thought this was the year, man.
No.
I did.
Hold on. So Nate came on and he predicted. We'll have to go back and check the records, but he actually predicted some major turnaround for the Mariners coming up.
He did. I didn't want to burst his bubble, but we knew it was coming.
Yeah. Roll with the punches.
How are we doing, Kory? I appreciate your dedication joining us tonight and not watching the Seahawks Rams game.
I tell you, if we lived in a different time where we could not record, so we have YouTube TV, so it is recording right now.
Yeah.
We have an NFL Game Day Pass, so it's I will be able to see it. And
so 10 years ago, you would have turned down this invitation and said, "Forget it, because I can't record it." Is that what
I would have given you alternative times?
Okay.
So how did you become a Seahawks fan?
I grew up in Spokane, Washington.
There you go.
And so I've in Seahawks Nation my whole life, and that's pretty much it.
Well, that'll do it.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Hey, now listen, we were talking before you came on, Kory, about some very deep things.
We're a little all over the place.
Yeah, we were all over the place. Listening to a podcast about embarrassing moments. One of the embarrassing moments, it said that embarrassing moments can expose your blind spots. Right? So, if we really kind of dissect that embarrassment and why we react the way that we react, we would have some insight into some of our maybe our own personal blind spots. Now, listen, I'm not going to ask you for your most embarrassing moment.
I'm willing to talk about them.
I guess that's why you're here. But I will say,
it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm thinking like I go to the embarrassing moments and it's literally like exposure happened, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. Sixth grade. Sixth grade. My mom made me homemade corduroy pants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sixth grade, bro. And they were powder blue, not like the cool San Diego Charger. Like all of a sudden that's cool now. These were not cool. And I was playing kickball and the crotch ripped out of the middle of my homemade cords. That was rough.
That is rough, especially at sixth grade.
Yeah.
But you had the chones on underneath, so we're good.
Yeah, there's that.
So there's that.
And then fast forward and I'm like maybe college.
Yeah.
And there's some shenanigans happening in the apartment.
Yeah.
And the pizza delivery girl shows up and I'm the sucker that has to go pay. And I go up and I'm paying and pants removed.
Your pants were removed? Just in the chones.
So roommates.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Roommates thought it'd be funny, right? Because that's kind of hilarious.
It's really hilarious, actually.
Yeah, there is something timeless about that. Really.
Yeah. That's something that takes a while before you'll laugh at it.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what
a lot of my moments are too. It took some time for some of them.
Yeah. Well, I was telling Mike, it's like a lot of times we tell these embarrassing stories and they're sort of self-deprecating and it's funny and but if we really kind of dial back to that time when it happened, I think there's a lot of pain associated with that embarrassing moment, right? And maybe that's where that blind spot comes, right? Where we can, if we go all the way back to that moment and we think, why was I so devastated in that moment? Now, granted, if your pants get pulled down, it's self-explanatory, right? But I mean,
I guess the important thing was that before or after TikTok. I'm guessing before. Right.
That was a wee bit before TikTok.
Okay, so you're probably good. It wasn't recorded.
That's true.
That's when the pain never ends.
That's very true. That's very true. So we were that's kind of where we started at. Okay. We started with embarrassing moments. Mike, bring us where did we end up at?
Well, and then we got into a little bit of everything. We're talking. I shared recently with Tyler some video series on cherishing your spouse, and how sometimes. So the blind spot thing led to me being an egomaniac, which led to me sometimes not necessarily cherishing my wife, and sometimes maybe even trying to one up my wife, or like we walk into a social setting and kind of making it about like there's the spotlight instead of allowing her to take that, kind of jumping in and dominating. Right. So, Mike got pretty vulnerable in that conversation, and I think it is, I think every time I attend a wedding, every time I'm like I'm thinking of sacred ceremonies and things, and I always walk away and that word cherish is bouncing around in my head.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm very good at that. And actually the person that was speaking, I think his name was Gary Thomas, and he made the analogy for a guy to understand what it means to cherish your wife. Think of your car and think of how you treat your car. And you know how sometimes guys get into these, they buy old cars, they fix them up, and they just spend thousands of dollars, and they go to show and shines, and they're driving it around, showing it off. And he's like, now can your relationship with your wife be like that? That's
a good analogy.
Yeah. So
my Kia doesn't get that sort of attention that
I think the tough thing there though is, and this is something my wife and I have definitely, I can tell my hat is being a little bit goofy, but maybe I'll keep it on.
Yeah, don't lose the hat.
I think the tough thing is, the way I want to be cherished does not align at all with the way my wife wants to be cherished. And although Tiffany and I have been married for now over 15 years, I think it's still difficult to go away from cherishing someone the way you want to be cherished instead of cherishing the way that speaks to them.
That's a good point. So what's been the path of realization for you on that?
Well, Tiffany has her subtle and very direct ways to let me know, which I appreciate. So I was getting ready for my first stint in Afghanistan. The tour I was in, I was learning the language, and I was going to be working with them. And so there's a lot of stress involved, right? And the thing is what I was doing, I was going to go for a year, come back for a little over a year, and then go for another year. So it's not, hey, we'll
year at a time.
But it's a lot of dedication, not just for me, but for my wife. And my kids were very young, much younger to really comprehend what was going on. But there was a lot of anxiety there, right? And this one was when things were still pretty real there. And the thing that the military offered was some free counseling for us, couples and their kids. And at first, when you hear counseling, you're like, okay, our marriage is not on the rocks. Why would we need counseling? And it wasn't. Our marriage wasn't on the rocks, but there was a lot of stress. And we decided, hey, it's for free. It's offered. There's a reason. So we decided to go into it. And we ended up getting a lot more out of it than I think either of us expected. And it helped us connect a lot more, which eased a lot of the anxiety going into that deployment. I think my wife learned that, as a military member, deploying, especially to a combat zone, is kind of like being on a basketball team and being able to actually play a game. However, that does not mean that we're looking at it like, hey, I get to be away from the family, the stressors, because you miss them authentically. And it is hard to not be there for your family. But at the same time, the most fulfilling thing you can do is to deploy to a combat zone. Then I learned in that same time that more specifics as to how I needed to learn the right empathy statements that my wife needed to know I had her back. I had full confidence in her, but also to understand what she was going through. And it still took work, but had we not done that, I think those deployments would have been much harder. And not that we couldn't have done it, but I think we would have had more unnecessary suffering, if that makes sense.
Well, I think of that deployment and what you just said. So there's nothing, as a service member, there's nothing more fulfilling than being deployed. But yet, being deployed brings with it adversity.
It's quite the dichotomy.
Yeah, and that reminds me of probably one of the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL, Russell Wilson, saying pregame, going into the Rams game tonight, that he embraced his character trait, loves adversity.
Yeah.
He embraces it. He looks for it, right? He celebrates it.
Mike, I love that attitude from a good quarterback in the NFL, but I guess the interesting thing about that is, because you see that in Russell Wilson, right? Like that he kind of exudes that he's going to take on the challenge and he's going to do it. But I feel like if as a team, not everyone was feeling that same way, right? The rest of the team was feeling like we're screwed. We're in a 2-game losing streak. This isn't happening. And Russell Wilson was like, dude, we're going to do it. Then I don't know how successful that's going to be, right? And I kind of think like the same thing when you're talking about counseling and, Kory, you say, well, this is how we felt. But I think if you were like, hey, look, we can do this, but Tiffany was like, I don't think we can do this, then it's not going to work, right? I mean, somehow you've got to figure out how to get on the same page. And quite honestly, I don't know, like when I'm thinking about football, I'm all in on that. Yeah, I can get there. This is going to be hard, but we're going to be victorious because we all work together. But man, you talk about that on a family level, like that would be, to me, that's super difficult to wrap my brain around. Like, how do I get to a place, or if I'm already at the place, like I can do this, but then I'm looking over at my spouse and my spouse is like, I don't know if this is even going to be possible. Like, how do you get the two of you on the same page, or how does Russell Wilson get the rest of the Seahawks on the same page? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I think first you have to focus on what you have in common. And what the counselors did is helped us bring out how much we loved each other, how much we cared for each other, and that was really the most important thing, regardless of what was happening. And once you build on all those commonalities, it's a lot easier to talk about the friction points and to work through those, as long as you keep those in the back of your mind and back of your mind and in the forefront. That's what helps.
That's interesting though. But to get to that point where you both feel like you're on the same page and you can, no matter, it's going to be difficult, but to be able to push through that, you have to recognize the friction points.
Yeah.
Right. And you got to bring that out first and address those to be able to build on the commonalities. So then it diminishes the size and the scope of the friction points.
Yeah, I think that common purpose, right, unifies. But I loved, Kory, I love what you said, it like your marriage wasn't on the rocks. And like, isn't that the time, right? Isn't that the time to be doing the work?
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about it from a battlefield perspective, right? Drilling in battle is not time to run drills.
Yeah.
Right? Or to run training.
Right.
You've got to have those things down going into the situations, right? Going into those battles. And I think that that's wisdom. That's wisdom seeking the opportunity to do that. Maybe even that idea of pedaling downhill. Like, hey, look, I know we're good, but life's going to throw at us some headwind, and it'd be really good if we had some tools and some strategies to cope with it when it comes.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. Yeah, Kory, are there things that you from that time when you did that counseling with Tiffany and in preparation for this deployment? Are there things that you still utilize or think about, or are they still there?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I'm not as quick-witted as I'd like to be with remembering those things, and I put myself in the penalty box per se. And sometimes it's, just a little, I like to be a little goofy, and it's at the wrong moments. But I think my wife and I guess when we're in those calm moments and we're able to talk about it, we bring back to that, and we've definitely improved. And I think the plan is to continue to improve. We're not there yet. And I guess the biggest thing, as a parent, is you hope that your kids pick up on all the good things you're doing and they somehow forget or ignore all the bad habits that you still have. And sometimes we resort to things that we're like, why did I do that? I knew I shouldn't behave that way. I knew I shouldn't interact with my spouse that way. I knew, and it's a constant uphill battle, but as long as we're still going up that hill, I guess,
Yeah. And I like that, because I think that, Mike, I like your point earlier, like, man, we do the drills before the game, right? Not during the game. And it's interesting though, because that's not how we think about relationships, right? We think of it as we get into the relationship is going to work, just because I'm a good looking guy. And so it's going to work. Right. But maybe I'm not the most prepared, good looking guy, and maybe there's something to be said for that. Like,
well, and I think that too, sometimes, like, selfishly, we're expecting immediate returns, where if you think about a relationship and investing, I don't necessarily think, at least maybe the dude brain doesn't necessarily think of like, I'm doing these things so that my wife and I will have this relationship that will weather these storms, right? It's like, I'm doing these dishes so that she'll think that's pretty hot over there, Mike doing dishes.
I'm doing dishes so I can have clean dishes to make the next mess. Right.
Right. I mean, I think it's important that we understand that there's that return on investments in relationships are down the road, right? We're doing these things, whether it's parenting or husband, wife, right? We're doing these things because, I mean, I think it's, yes, it's duty. Yes, it's responsibility. Yes, it's expectations, but it's like, what if her joy was my joy? Like, what kind of life would that be if I could make my joy is my wife happy?
If you could just be cool playing the tambourine in the band.
Because that makes her happy, getting up there and do lead vocals, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I'd say the cowbell, but
we always need more cowbell, man.
Yeah.
So hold on. So Kory, let's get some background. You mentioned kids. So we got your wife, Tiffany. Give me the rundown on the kids.
Okay, so we have 4 kids. Braxton, Alexa, and we named her before Amazon did.
That's good.
We have Fletcher and we have Kaylee.
Okay, very cool. So Tyler, how do you know this guy and what do you love about him?
So I think I've met Kory through church. It's how we first became acquainted with him and his family, and just a great family, man. They work hard, they play hard, they're fun and funny, and just all the things that you want out of people that you want to be around. And I tell you, Kory is just one of those guys that is always willing to do and to, take on whatever challenge is put in front of him. He's willing to do it. And I admire that a lot. So that's why you find yourself, recording the Seahawks game, Kory,
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward, Kory, to getting into your journey and finding out a little bit about how you became the person that Tyler admires, and game recognizes game. And that's how we do it, right? We have a podcast called Richest Men in Town, and we walk around with eyes wide open, trying to see who's living lives that we admire. So when this guy reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I got this podcast and I think it's got your name written all over it," what goes through your mind?
Well, I was pretty surprised. I was wondering, why does he want to talk to me? I mean, I like Tyler. Tyler's the bomb. He does have weaknesses like being a Raiders fan and stuff, but no, very, I was surprised. I guess that's the best way to do it. And, thinking internally, wow, someone would be interested. And I think of myself as a relatively ordinary guy that's, tried his best, like most guys, to have a career, to take care of their kids and raise them. And
that answer right there, Kory, is exactly why you're here, right? I mean, I think that when we talk to people and we say, "Hey, you should come on this show," every single person that we've invited has said, "Why would you want me on this show?" And what Mike and I have realized is that is the answer that gets you squarely in the seat that you're in, right? Is that, you're just living life. And quite frankly, I mean, I feel like life's tough. Life is messy. Life is hard. And when we, as a group of people, see people that are doing it, even if it's just less messy than the way I'm doing it, like, I want to know, I want to learn from that. And so I'm excited that you're here, man. So
Kory, where's home now? Where are you now?
So we are in Parris Island, South Carolina. So for any current or former Marines, I know there's chills going up and down your backbone. Plenty of bugs here too. That's one of my collateral duties, is the bug killer in the family. So, but we like it. People are really nice. Actually, the first place we've been, were a town festival. They had an opening prayer.
Oh, wow.
I was shocked. Never experienced that. Really, really good people. When I first got here, before the family, getting into the new job, went out to breakfast, and I had cinnamon French toast, and they asked what kind of meat I would like, and I selected sausage, and they said, "Or you can get the upgraded meat." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And they said, "Deep fried bologna." And then she saw my look on my face, and she goes, "We like to deep fry things in the South, sir." I haven't tried it yet, but I'm sure I'll find a moment to do that.
You know what? I would have jumped on that deep fried bologna. If someone tells me it's an upgraded meat, sign me up, man. I say no more. Just put it on the plate.
In order for deep fried bologna to be the upgraded meat, that frying process has to be amazing.
100%. Because I got to tell you, when I was a kid, and we were not well off by any stretch of the imagination, there was lots of fried bologna sandwiches, and I don't know, man.
Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. So you were stationed for a time in San Diego, it sounds like, maybe.
A couple times.
Okay. So that's a rough gig down there.
Yeah. So yeah, it's terrible. The beaches, the Mexican food. It's rough.
So let's go back take me back to Spokane. So okay. I don't know. We're huge fans of It's a Wonderful Life, right? We got a podcast we dedicate to the kind of that character of George Bailey and seeking out the George Baileys that are around us. And George Bailey's story starts on a frozen pond somewhere, Bedford Falls. Kory, where does your story start?
So Spokane's mostly where I grew up. I guess we were there permanently for the rest of my youth from like 6th grade on. We lived on Vashon Island, which is near Seattle, for a few years of my childhood. And before that, also Spokane. But Yeah, we got there. What caused us to move from Vashon actually, I was 11. My parents had just had their seventh child, and my dad had a couple strokes at a young age.
Mm.
And so we relocated, and life was tough. Little to no income for a large part of the first year. And we limped along. We had help from above and help from other people.
How old were you?
So I was 11 when that happened.
Okay.
And I'm the second oldest of the family. So it was rough. I was getting to that age where what you wore mattered, especially going into junior high a year later.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that happen that you want to forget, but it's part of what made me who I am. So I don't regret it, how it happened at all. And God bless my mom for getting through that time. I can't even imagine what it would have been like. At 11, I was relatively young to really comprehend what was the depth of what was going on. Just remember the nights of hearing your mom cry and so forth. My dad was in the hospital when he had him, so the symptoms he still has are really subtle and you wouldn't know it, but they've been able to fight, and the honor I give them is they still stayed true to God above through all of that. And so
can you,
well, if you don't mind me prying a little bit, but I'm just wondering, when you say these stories of things that happened to you are part of what made you who you are. What part of your identity did those things forge?
Well, independence, definitely. I was bred to be very independent. If I wanted something that was nicer, I had a paper out as soon as we moved to Spokane. That was back when young boys could deliver papers starting at 4 a.m.
Yeah, that's right.
And that first winter in Spokane, we had a massive winter front come down, a cold front come down from British Columbia. And it got down to 40 below or 50 below with wind chill.
Oh.
I never got so many tips as a young kid as I did then. A lot of free hot cocoa. In junior high, which is pretty unforgiving, there was a lot of loneliness that I kept to myself in what I was experiencing. And, it would have been better if I had opened up about it, but it's still, I became quite the thinker and the ponderer from that experience, which is definitely a benefit for a future civil engineer. Yeah, it definitely forged who I was, especially in those areas.
Thinker ponderer, Tyler.
Yeah, we were just
that's
saying,
my new identity.
That's what you want to be, the guy chewing on his lip in the back, just thinking about life, man.
So when we've done military moves, there's times where I listen to podcasts or to Holy Writ or just going through my playlist on iTunes. And then there was one day I was moving things across the country. Tiff called and she said, "So what were you listening to today?" And I said, "You know what? All day I just sat and thought about things." And she's like, "Oh my goodness, that would drive me crazy." And Tyler, knowing Tiffany, should not be surprised that would drive her crazy.
That's right. Yep. Yeah.
But yeah.
I'm curious about, Mike asked a question about kind of forging who you are in those experiences. And you said, I kept a lot of that to myself. Looking back, was that a defense mechanism? Was that a protection for family? Like, I don't need to burden anybody with these things, or what was that? Where did that come from?
I think it was probably more of the protection thing.
Yeah.
Right. There was a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not trying to fault anything. I mean,
right.
I think my mom could and dad, the way they lived through that and the decisions they made to get through that. I think there's very few people on this planet who could have done it better than them. As a young adult, and it was still in the times where, hey, it is not popular to seek help.
Yeah, right.
It's been sought, and that's the culture that's been created unintentionally. Our religion, multiple religions, and among people in the military, seeking help is a sign of weakness, and it's getting better, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, I mean, look, at the end of the day, whenever there's something going on at home, right, no matter what it is, kids they can read the room. Sometimes we think that they're not knowing what's going on and they're just oblivious and, watching SpongeBob and life is good, but SpongeBob's on, but they know what's going on. Right.
Yeah.
And so how they choose to deal with that is interesting, because every kid's going to kind of take that on in their own way. Can you talk about your mom and sort of the example and what you learned from your mom?
Yeah. So both my parents grew up in Spokane. They met at BYU, but my mom, she converted to our faith at 18, right? So she first learned about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints while in high school, and joined. And her mom, my grandma, was not happy about it, right? And I think it's because of a lot of stereotypes or other things heard through there. She's not happy about it at all. And so she did that. She was one of two children in a family. She did it. And which, that's hard to go solo like that, especially when you don't get support from home.
Yeah. Can I ask if grandma in your mom's house, was it a religious home? Did they have a faith that they attended? And I think that, that makes it even harder, right? Because you sort of have that built in, and that's your rock, the things that you lean on, or that you're hoping your family leans on, and to have someone say, well, I'm going to go do this other thing. That's tough.
And that's one of those things also, is you're not going to see the fruits or the blessings until much later on. So
yeah, right.
Our grandma saw her grandkids, and her other son, my uncle, he converted a few years later.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So her entire posterity changed to the faith that she didn't want them to change.
Wow.
But that being said, she noticed some differences and admired those. Very stubborn German background. I know I'm being stereotypical, but a very stubborn background, and she definitely warmed up to it, and she ended up. I have a lot of great memories with my grandparents.
Yeah. And so mom meets dad at BYU, and then do they come back to Washington at that point? After BYU,
dad went to BYU. Then I think he was exposed to some illegal drug or something and transferred to the University of Utah. Went to school there for a bit. I was born there, and then soon thereafter moved back to Washington.
Does that make you a Ute by birthright? I mean, how does this work?
In my household, until one of my siblings married a Utah graduate, no one has ever cheered for the University of Utah at any time. It was pure out of education needs.
Okay.
So I have a lot of good friends that are Ute fans, so it's a fun rivalry.
I think it's funny. We were talking before you joined in, and how so many times I'm not necessarily modeling richest men in town approved behavior when it comes to my sports watching.
Yeah, it's all sports. It all goes out the window.
Fan etiquette.
Yeah.
Sometimes we struggle sometimes to yell at our TVs and judge people for mistakes. I'm just thinking, like, I love all sports, right, across the board. I'm thinking that what we're doing to Ben Simmons right now,
he's a bum. Simmons, you got to hit those free throws.
Well, you got to hit the dunk, right?
I know, dude.
He's right there, and he passes it. But, like, who hasn't botched it before?
Yeah.
And, like, we're done with him, right? It's just interesting.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. I have an interesting question, and I'm kind of I'm kind of curious. You talked a little bit about being 11 years old and not being fully aware of what was happening, but you hear your mom upset. And, I think it's funny when kids get older and they graduate high school and then they get into their early adult and they come home and visit and the stories start coming out, right? The kids start letting mom and dad into what kind of the rest of the story, what really happened. I just wonder, Kory, for you in your life, was there ever a moment as an adult where your mom and dad let you in on those struggles, or are they still guarded?
They've definitely let me into a lot of things. And I think as I grew up, especially the moments of raising kids, sometimes with them laughing in the background as we struggled to deal with the craziness that happens with raising a family. I don't remember a point in time. I think it's something that just gradually grew. Yeah.
That's a tough question, Mike, because I just, as Kory's talking, I'm thinking about my own experience, right? And I don't know, because there were some tough times in my house when I was a kid. And I don't know that I've ever had a conversation really in depth with my mom or my dad about those times. But it certainly shapes or has helped to shape maybe my empathy towards my mom and my dad. Like there's things that whether it's topics or situations that may arise where I am much quicker to be soft in that situation, I guess, because I recognize it as something that has maybe, is a sore spot.
Yeah.
And so maybe those things, that's interesting though, because, I haven't my kids and my wife and our relationship, we have a totally different life than I did when I was a kid, growing up with my siblings and my mom and my dad. And so, I don't know that, the opportunity to have those deep conversations with my own kids, which I tell my kids, I'm a open book, man. They want to know, they probably know things that they never wanted to hear, but I tell them all kinds of stuff. But that's an interesting thought. Like,
yeah. And I almost think too, like, and I don't want to paint it with a broad brush because I mean, everyone's situation is a little different, but you talked about how they stayed true, right? And they kept their promises. And I think that there's a power there. As we keep our promises and we keep our covenants through adversity, we unlock some power and we're going to get some help. We're going to get some heavenly help. And I just wonder too, if like they'd almost view it as murmuring, right? Because when you're in it, those moments become pretty sacred. And when you're through it, it's not necessarily like I'm going to go out and share all of the adversity I went through because I'm going to hold those dear because those forged some things. I almost think of like that pioneer example, right? When the survivor who's come across the plains on the Willie Martin handcart company, and he's in church and they start criticizing the leaders and the decisions that were made. And he stands up and he says, I was on that company. And let me tell you right now, right? I wouldn't trade that experience for nothing because I knew God was there and I knew God was helping me through it. And there were points where I'd say, I can't go any further. And somehow I'm finding the strength to go further, right? And I think that sometimes as parents, there's moments where it's like, this is hard. But man, those are the times when you're learning, right? Yeah. You're on sacred ground and you're learning so many things about you, about God, about his son, Jesus Christ, and the plan and how we're going to live after that manner of happiness, that it almost feels like down the road, why would I go back and say, man, that was so freaking hard. Let me tell you all the things that happened.
Yeah.
I don't know. That I think that's just an interesting thought, because to me it almost feels like that's water under a bridge, and I'm only remembering the good times. If I'm doing it right, it's all gilded when I look back.
I think that's true. Yeah, I agree with that. It makes me think of Jason Parrott, right? We had him on and he talked about going to the Catholic church up on the hill in San Diego, right? And looking out, and I think Mike, you and I kind of said that was his Sacred Grove experience, because you're sort of looking back on all that has transpired, and maybe at the same time looking forward as to all that is possible, and maybe there's a tipping point somewhere in there, right? Where we go through this, these tough situations, and we get to a point maybe where we're at the edge of the tunnel, and we see light, and we can look back and go, gosh, that was miserable, but
I wouldn't trade it.
I mean, that's a hard thing to get to, because it's funny, because I've often thought, like, man, if I could change that, I certainly would.
Yeah, but I'm hearing Kory say the things I went through made me
absolutely
who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And who I am is kind of working. Right.
Yeah. And I want to get to some stuff about, but before we venture further from this, Kory, let me ask you, Mike brought up the point, and you mentioned that, through all of these trials that mom and dad were going through, that they stayed true to God and to their faith and their commitments and their beliefs. Is that something that you recognized as a young boy? Or is that something in hindsight you look back and go, gosh, this is...
Well, and I'm not a perfect leader by any means, but if there's something I have learned about leadership, it's consistency, right? Some of the leaders, most famous leaders that have failed big time, lack consistency, right? They were constant. They were as constant as people, as anyone could be in their faith, and just trying to work their lives out with the challenges that they were handed. And it was kind of like a Job situation. There was nothing in their lives they were doing that merited the trials that we had. It was just life.
Can I throw a highlighter on that really quick?
Yeah.
Right? Like, if people are listening, I think that that's a fallacy that's a trap we fall in, that I'm going through this thing and this indicates God's not pleased with me, right? Or that I've somehow done something to deserve my lot. Now, there are times when I'm in a mess and it's 100% my mess.
Right.
But there are things, like Kory's saying, there are things that sometimes it's the university of life. It's life. And sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down. When we're down, it doesn't mean the heavens are closed. It doesn't mean any of those things that we sometimes tell ourselves. So
I think we just listened to a week into that, right? Of talking about that, and I appreciate that lesson. I think that's a great reminder, because I think sometimes we say, well, we'll make changes because God's angry with me, right? Because I'm not living how I should be. But maybe we just need to make adjustments because it's just life, right? And we just are doing it because it's the right thing to do. Can you talk a little bit, Kory, about what faith looked like in your house growing up with mom and dad?
So I would say we and led by my parents, tried to do all the right things that we were supposed to. One of the traditions that we always did is family home evening. And even though there was many, many nights where one or many of the kids would do everything possible, not consciously, but to disrupt it.
Sometimes consciously, though, right?
I mean, as a kid, if one of your siblings is supposed to pass by you to go up and do whatever responsibility they had, it's hard not to stick your leg out and trip them.
Amen.
So
Amen.
tempting. And then to be between two siblings that are touching you, it just drives you crazy. So, or to make up lyrics to a song that are not vulgar, but inappropriate.
Yes.
So I would say we had many, many imperfect family home evenings, nights with the family, but nevertheless, they were constant. Reading in the scriptures. Again, a lot of events that I just talked about would occur during those, which but it was constant, and it stuck. I was always one inclined to always try to be obedient. I wasn't a rebellious kid per se, not perfect by any means, but I tried to do the right thing, and I generally believed what I believed. And I guess that brings me to one of my hinges is, so it was 1995, and it was the solemn assembly for President Gordon B. Hinckley, the newly confirmed prophet and president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we had it on cable. I was a typical teenager. I was in my senior year. I was just lying face down in a beanbag in the basement with everyone else watching, just being like, I'm here listening. And when it was time to affirm him, my face in the beanbag, I just slowly raised my hand like everybody else. And when I did that, I had a feeling fill me from head to toe. That was the warmest, most profound feeling that I could ever experience. It was not asked for, solicited. I was not currently praying to ask for some witness or something to give to me. It was just confirmed. And that filled me up so much. And being a teenager, I just kept my head in the pillow, but I was weeping to myself. And I knew that the Lord was my Savior. I knew that the servant of God being called was called of him. That hooked me right there.
Okay, I love that, because there's two things, Mike, that let me just say two things that I love about that. One is I love how you said this was not asked for, because I believe that sometimes if we're in the right place, even just because we're supposed to be in the right place, right? Not because we've got dressed up and we decided we're going to go there and try to have an experience, but mom and dad said, you got to be here. And you're going to sit your butt on the beanbag, and that's going to be that. I think that sometimes those things happen just because we've allowed ourselves to be in the right place. And I think there's something to be said for that. I often tell youth in the church, I know some of you are here because mom and dad told you that you had to, or you couldn't go on a date tomorrow night, right? So there's no choice. But because you're here, something good's going to happen. If we're just gonna proceed with that in mind, something good's gonna happen. I love that. I love that thought.
Well, I think Kory, I'm gonna share something that I shared with Tyler. It's from a book I'm reading, Wild at Heart. I just want to read it because it's this right here, right? He says this: if you wanted to learn how to heal the blind and you thought that following Christ around and watching how he did it would make things clear, you'd wind up pretty frustrated. He never does it the same way twice. He spits on one guy. For another, he spits on the ground and makes mud and puts that on his eyes. To a third, he simply speaks. A fourth, he touches. And a fifth, he kicks out a demon. There are no formulas with God. The way in which God heals our wound is a deeply personal process. He is a person, and he insists on working personally. I love this podcast project because I get to sit down every week and I get to hear how he did it for you.
Yeah.
And it's different than how he did it with the guy last week, right? I mean, I think the idea is here you are dutifully, good son, doing what you need to do, not necessarily in it. And he's like, today, Kory's going to have a moment.
I'm giving it to him.
I dig that.
Yeah.
Well,
and then I love the idea of you just crying into your pillow.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a moment and I'm going to keep this all to myself.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's perfect timing too, because months after that, I began basic training in the Army. And boy, was it good to have that before going to basic training in the Army.
What did that talk to me about that a little bit? What did that experience mean to you? I mean, what did you do with that?
you look where basic training is now with all the rules and so forth to protect kids, and that makes me feel old calling them kids now. But but it's a challenge. Their mission there is to break you down, and that's a great mission to create a fighting force. Break you down. You need to become a team member, not an individual. And in that breaking down process, there's some traditions, some which are being proven not effective, but were practiced nevertheless. And it is not, there's a lot of mothers that would cover their kids' ears for what goes on in boot camp, right?
Yeah.
That was I was a senior in high school right before that, and I went straight to that, and I could have been on my own. And after that experience, being hooked, I brought those little tiny maroon colored military scriptures with me. They don't, for some reason, allot you 30 minutes a day to study scriptures of Holy Writ in boot camp.
Really? That's odd.
So at night, after showering, going to bed, hours before we'd be woken again, I'd make sure I'd just go into a stall and I'd dive in, and I'd pray on my rack or my cot, my bunk. Those two things alone helped me survive and learn, for me to not come away weakened, but strengthened. And I'm speaking more spiritually.
Sure.
I definitely left there more physically fit, but that was a true trial. And then after that, it was for the Army Reserve. After that, the next summer, I found myself in the Missionary Training Center, and I had no sympathy for the complaints of all the rules there. I'll tell you that. I did not show a lot of empathy to those who complained. I probably did more of a military response to it, but that was that fire, and it was hard. Boot camp is so hard. I mean, you think you're smart when you finish high school, but you're not.
Yeah, you're right.
You're on the cusp of everything you're going to learn in your life, and but it definitely forged a lot of who I am, and I am way far from perfecting a lot of areas of my life, but it definitely helped me. And
so what did that moment do? We speak a lot about identity, and something powerful happens in your life when you learn who you are. So that experience on the beanbag, what did that do for you as far as your concept of identity?
Well, knowing I am a child of God and that He loves me, and that He's putting things and people on this earth to help guide me, is one thing. The other is knowing that His gospel is true gives a different perspective. And this is something I think what did I call it? The boot camp mentality that got me through. And I think can get anybody through, is realizing there is an end to this suffering. The Army did not want me to die out there. Right. And Heavenly Father does not want us to die and suffer here for the sake of suffering, but He wants us to grow, and He wants us to return to Him. How can you do that without the suffering? There's so many ways to suffer, but in life, I know there's going to be an end, and I know who's going to win the battle. And so knowing that, I think knowing how a game ends up makes it easier. There's a less of a stress as to what the outcome is, and I'm going to be vulnerable here. In Super Bowl 49, when we decided to go for the pass instead of let Marshawn run it in, which people remind me plenty. I'm still paying off loans for psychiatric help with that one. But imagine going through that game knowing you're going to win. It's knowing you're on the winning team. It's a different perspective, right? It lessens that stress. Then you're just like, okay, we still need to do it. We need to earn it. And it's still going to be tough. And the reason I call it the boot camp mentality is that's what got me through boot camp too. That was a small piece of life. And knowing the end helped me get through that. And that translated to going into a combat zone. Now, I'm not a SEAL or a Ranger or someone who's going to kick in doors. Everything I did in Afghanistan, Hollywood would not want to make a movie about. Some good stories, but nothing that is movie worthy. But knowing the end gives me the confidence to move forward and the strength to move forward, and also takes away the stress of, what's going to happen here.
Is that, I think too, like that part of that boot camp mentality too, is there is an end and there is a purpose, right? I'm thinking of like Essential Conversations, maybe 2 conferences ago, I think, where they were trained. They're laying in boot camp. They're laying in the heat, and their instructor's saying, "Don't move," and they're out there and they're sweating. Right. And he's feeling just anger towards this instructor. Well, then you fast forward to the battleground. He's in a situation where he's got to drop and not move for hours. If he moves, he's killed. And he understands, oh, everything I went through in boot camp has a purpose. And I think too, like the idea is like in life, the suffering that we go through, these hard things, number one, there's degrees of hard, right? What you think is hard, there's always somebody going through something more difficult than yours. But 2, there's a purpose to it. And I think that if we keep those 2 things in mind, I think that that's a great boot camp mentality to get us through things. Yeah, why the Army?
So being the second of 7 in the financial situation we were in, and being independent, I went out and looked for how am I going to move forward? I need help at starting my education. And after many, many free meals at McDonald's from a recruiter, he hooked me. And honestly, if looking back, that's probably not what I really would have wanted to choose. But everything that I did and was a part of me in the Army, again, was part of that broken road that forged who I was. So in that sense, I don't want to take any of it back. So I became a combat engineer, which is basically mobility, counter mobility, blowing holes in the enemy's line, clearing minefields, or creating obstacles for the enemy. And a lot of grunt work there, but that started my college education.
When you don't hear a lot of, I went to boot camp and then I went to the MTC. That sequence doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's
very really, often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I was in the reserves, and you have 2 years on your contract for inactive ready reserve, where you just have to be alive. And normally that's at the very end of all the time you serve, then you do those 2 years. Well, in the reserves, you're able to move those ahead and then come back and fulfill the rest of your time. And so I was able to do that to serve a 2-year mission. But yeah, you're right. You don't hear that a lot.
Where did you serve?
Santiago North mission in Chile.
Santiago.
Yeah.
All right. I served in Uruguay. So
okay.
Yeah, things were pretty hopping down in Chile.
I loved it. It was not Mexico by any means.
I'm curious that boot camp mentality where you talk about knowing that this is for a greater purpose, right? That the suffering's not going to last, that there's something on the other side of this. Was that a realization in boot camp? Was that something that a way that you've always thought? I mean, where does that, I'm just trying to picture myself pre-missionary. This is not a thought process that's going through my head at any time. This suffering will end. No, I was thinking my suffering is the worst. And, I was probably dramatic about it and all that good stuff. So where does that Where does that come from? That thought process. I tell my kids that now all the time. They complain. I say, hey, you can do anything for 2 weeks. You can do anything for 2 years. You can do anything for 30 days.
You do
right?
use that mentality all the time.
All the time with them. I say it all the time. But when I was their age, I was like, this will never end. I'm I'm in the middle of it and it will never end. So where does that come from?
I don't know. It's just a perspective that I don't know if I adopted it, if I have a mentor that gave me some pointers, but that was just the perspective that grew on me. You know, there's times, and plenty of times in boot camp, where you're in the front leaning rest position, which is basically plank. It's a fun name for it. Where you're like, my shoulders hurt, I'm about to fall. There's a guy with a big round brown hat on that is just waiting for me to be the first one to fall. This is not fun. And it's 3:30 in the morning, right. You know, and, but again, there's a purpose. I will say my sleep schedule, the difficulties that come at you in a war zone are way more difficult and have much more, much higher stakes to what the outcome is than boot camp.
Yeah. So let's connect some dots. So you're in Chile for a couple of years.
Yeah.
How do you get? Talk to me about life after the mission.
Okay, so I came back. I went to Rick's College, which I also know dates me a little bit.
A lot, actually. A lot. Rick's College.
Wait, we're not going to qualify that. We're not going to qualify that Rick's College. So Rick's College is
just
now
let people know.
BYU, Idaho.
Yeah,
BYU,
right.
Idaho. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I went there and continued on with my civil engineering degree. While there, the president of the college was President David A. Bednar, which I think I ran into him once on campus. He asked me some general how you do questions. I gave some
general doing fine.
I'm hurrying up to class, but how do you do, sir? Answers, and went on my way. Then after there, I transferred to BYU down in Provo. So during that time, I was in the Army Reserve. I was drilling every weekend, going on annual training. I got a lot of good experiences going to several different places to get some good training. And while at BYU, I got a letter from the Navy, from the Civil Engineer Corps, saying, hey, join us. Part of our career path in the Civil Engineer Corps is we will send you to grad school for free. We will support you getting licensed. And, you know, if you've heard of the Navy Seabees, we are part of the Navy Seabees, and we don't really go on ships. So I decided, hey, this looks like a great opportunity. This was about 6 months before 9/11. They were overmanned in what I did for the Army, and they released me from my contract after I got accepted into the Navy program. Then finished out at BYU, and in 2003 went to Pensacola Officer Candidate School. Got my butt kicked again. Inside, kind of rolling my eyes, thinking, I already been broken down. But went through that, and then got commissioned in August of 2003 as an officer, and headed out to Port Hueneme, California, to Sea Battalion out there, and started my Navy career.
All right. So can you talk to us about how you met Tiffany?
Okay. Well, this is a perfect segue, because I was, I went to BYU. I was an engineering student, and engineering building is, of course, windowless, and they always put up posters of, hey, the nursing school dance with the engineering students dance, trying to get, two groups together that stereotypically are favoring a male or female. Didn't do anything for me. So I graduated single, and while in that CB battalion at Port Hueneme, one thing I found, I dated often. A lot of feedback I got unintentionally, I think, on the other part was, oh, I can never marry into the military. And my my singles ward bishopric, one of my bishops, he actually counseled me. He said, "Hey, I would consider getting out of the military because it does not seem in your favor." And it's like, I know, but I can't change my career path. This is
right.
So I went on my second deployment. It was the same time Katrina happened down in New Orleans. I went on my second deployment and I was headed to Iraq. And this is Iraq in 05, 06. So it was anything but boring there. But the mission we were supporting detainee operations. And so we had, the Army owns detainee operations. So we went down to El Paso to get the detainee training experience because we were going to be around them. And this was not too long after some bad media had happened with treatment of the detainees. So we had to check that box for so many reasons. So I was in El Paso area at Fort Bliss, Texas, for about 3.5 months.
Fort Bliss. Training. It sounds lovely, actually. Fort Bliss.
It is.
Okay.
There are a lot of great deals on real estate, but and I would like to say I enjoyed a lot of the barbecue they had, but they kept us on a tight leash out in the desert. So I didn't experience too much of what they had to offer, but a lot of moon dust there. But while there, we had Wi-Fi, right?
Okay.
And it was not near what it is today. And so I was like, okay, I'm here for 3 or 4 months. Then I'm going on a 6-month deployment and I have no prospects. And so I decided, you know what? And for my friends that knew me, I was a huge anti-meeting online anything. So for me to do it, it was like Darwin deciding to preach creation. Well, I decided to do it. I wasn't telling anyone. And then...
so your closet online dating.
Yeah. And and I winked at Tiffany. We chatted for a while, and then we started calling. And there was this area outside our little hooch we were in, and while talking to her on the phone, I created this circle that I was just walking in. Yeah, and we fell in love, and I went on through the deployment, and not too long after we got married.
Wow. And Tiffany was where at this time?
So she was in Colorado, and I don't want to tell her story for her, but she was in a singles ward herself, and she basically said that the guys in her singles ward that she was meeting were basically focused on new additions to their truck or their car, and there was
cherishing their truck.
Cherishing. Yes. There we go.
Yeah, they were single adults acting like high school kids, basically. Yeah. And I'm sure there was some good ones, but lucky for me that none never took. So,
well, and lucky for you, she didn't discriminate with military.
She actually wanted to marry a service member. That was one of her goals. Now, during deployments, I'm sure she kicked herself and beat her head into the wall. What was I thinking?
Right.
This is not what I imagined.
That's right.
So can we get into, and we'll do this tactfully, right? Can we talk a little bit about Afghanistan more globally and the influence that it had on your life? Recently, Tyler and I were talking a little bit about how great minds think and see similarities, small minds see differences. And we're of the belief that the more we sit down with people that are different than us, we actually end up finding similarities. Could you speak to a little bit about what your experience in Afghanistan did to confirm or deny that?
Yeah, definitely. And with a heavy heart, I do this. And of course, everything I say with Afghanistan is my opinion and my experiences, nothing to do with military or political decisions.
Right. I mean, you're active military right now, right? So
yes.
Yeah, we get that. We're big fans of disclaimers.
Absolutely. Love them.
Yeah. So having served a mission in Chile, I learned a lot about listening and building relationships of trust and learning. The more you get to know their language, the more you realize they're really just like me. They have some different things that I think are quirky. They behave differently, but they're really that. But I also learned the discipline of another language. And actually, to go back to that, while in San Diego the first time, we were deciding where I was going to go. I was thinking about getting out of the Navy soon. And my wife looked at the billet list, the job list for the next rank. And one of them was this thing called Afghanistan, Pakistan hands, or AFPAC hands. And she pointed at that. What's this? I said, oh, you don't want that. You spent a lot of time in Afghanistan for that. And anybody can Google or YouTube that program. It's basically many walks of life out of the military, medical, engineering, infantry, picket, all those different services. They plucked out of all of us, and they said, and General McChrystal was a big part of this, is we need to build better relationships with the Afghans. This isn't learning languages or learning people for the sake of intel. This is to build relationships. And so that next day at work, after we had that brief thing, Tiff all of a sudden called me at like 10 or 10:30 in the morning at work, and she said, you have to do AFPAC hands. And I said, did you hit your head? That no, I looked at it on YouTube and it is totally you. Anyways, after prayer and much thought, we volunteered. And for a job like that, I'll say the detailer or the guy in charge of placing us, he was like, oh, sure, I'll put you right in there. It's not something people normally volunteer for.
Right.
And so I started in the language, Pashto, which is extremely difficult for fans of Princess Bride. Learning Pashto was like going on the machine and getting 7 years sucked out of my life. Well, I'll die 7 years earlier because of what I had to do and the toll it took on my body. But I worked at it, right? I knew I had the confidence of building a language once. I knew the steps I needed to make, even though Pashto is much harder than Spanish. And so I put all my effort in that. We got about 4 months of language training. Took me a month to get the alphabet down, but I got it. And then when we got into country,
a month to get the alphabet.
Yeah, you're reading right to left. Everything's different, all the symbols. Yeah. But it's on that it's not a linear curve. It's definitely exponential. That's the word. So I got in and I knew I'd already been trained for my mission how to build relationships of trust. Obviously in the mission we had and the rules that we go by, I can't do the part of recognizing the spirit.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I stayed true to that. But the big part is building those relationships. And when I got there, just as I learned in Chile, I just opened my mouth. Any Afghan I ran into, I spoke it. And, it was rough at first. They laughed at me sometimes by how I pronounced things. But then I began to understand, and that's when the real learning took place. Afghans are amazing, humble children of God, and they have been through a lot. They have a lot of faith in God, and I wish I could have so many people see what I saw in the Afghan people. And when I say the Afghan people, I'm not saying the people in power. I'm not talking about the corrupt folks, the warlords. I'm talking about a real Afghan person.
Street level.
Trying to survive.
Right.
And just the same hope as you and I is that our kids turn out better than us. And learning that language was the key. When they saw that I spoke Pashto, they knew it was effort. In fact, they have a joke. So the other language is Dari, the other main language. official language, I should say, which is basically Farsi. So it's even closer than Portuguese and Spanish. They have a joke that there was a guy calling from Kandahar to Kabul, collect, and the operator said, "Okay, what language is this going to be in?" And he said, Dari or Farsi, and he said, "Okay, it'll be, I don't know, 10 Afghanis," and I don't remember the number. And then the next person calls and said, "Yeah, I'm going to make the same collect call." And okay, so what language? And he said Pashto. And they said, "Oh, that'll be 500 Afghanis because it overloads the circuits." And so that's an Afghan joke. And I know I butchered part of it, the numbers or whatever, but the basis of it, Afghans admit it's a complex language. And so when they saw I had put effort into trying to learn what they say, how they talk, their customs, I have friends that I know would jump on a grenade for me. In fact, there were times that Afghans called me and said, "Don't come in today." On the military side, there's no intel threat. They just called me and said, "Don't come in today." They protected me. I was their guest of honor. And a lot of it has to do with their Pashtun Wali, which is kind of like their code. They were truly my friends. And one of the things they asked me, "Why are so many Americans atheist?" And I said, "What do you mean they're atheists?" I was like, we're a Christian nation. And they respect that and know and have heard that, which they respect because it's one of the gods. It's part of, it's under Abraham, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Well, we never hear any Americans talk about God." And that was a very profound lesson for me. And now I was kind of in a pickle, right? And so all I had to do was acknowledge God. Yeah, I'm here thanks to God's help. I was able to arrive safely today. Just including him in my language, not proselyting, not getting into a religious discussion, but just acknowledging God and all the blessings I had and so forth. And to them, that was being real. And to them, that meant something. And when I learned, let me go in a couple quick experiences I had in Kandahar. There was this, and I'm not ever using names for their protection. There was this humble, low-ranking Kandahar police officer or police sergeant, I should say. And we were helping them with some supplies, and we were talking, and they were always excited to talk to me because there's just not a lot who can speak the language. So you get a little bit of you get a lot of groupies per se when they find out you can do that. And he started tearing up, talking about how proud he was of his wife becoming not a nursemaid, but
a doula.
A doula, right? Thank you. And in Afghan traditions, a lot of women do that, but they don't get educated to do it. His wife did, and he was so proud of her. And Kandahar is known for its strictness with Islam and so forth. So the stereotype is the men are brutes. They don't respect womanhood. But I saw this man weeping for joy, not out of control, but tearing up that his wife had achieved that. And there was no purpose in this. There was no note-taking, no press, this was just two guys talking that were starting to bond. And the other situation, which to me is really tender and also frustrating, it's my first time when I was up in Kabul. One of the engineers I worked with, very simple man. We just gotten out of a meeting or something, and we were in an area, and he knew we were by ourselves. And it's a common thing for Afghans to pull you aside and to ask for money, to ask for help, for medical assistance, because they know we have better. And he put his hand on my shoulder and started crying and saying, my daughter has an infection in her leg. There's nothing they can do here. I need to get her to a hospital in Pakistan. Is there any way you can help me get to a hospital in Pakistan? And I had gotten to the point in language that we could have that discussion. And if anything, the only thing I could do was assure him, and because they're very strict, if you start giving any funds, it's going to go bad. I honestly wanted to call Tiffany and say, hey, hon, I gave this guy $500. But I felt strongly that I just had to resist that urge. And I gave him a hug, and we both teared up, and I said, I am praying for you till I die. And it was not the answer he wanted. But I had moments like that with these simple folks that are just trying to survive. And, he cared about his daughter. It's his daughter. Those are some of those experiences that I would never, ever go without. There's so many more other experiences. And had I not taken the time to listen and to build those relationships and to learn from them, my lens of Afghanistan is completely different from other people. And because go ahead.
I was just going to ask, given those experiences and the time that you spent in Afghanistan, how do you honor those experiences in your life now, being so far removed from that time?
I guess just trying to continue down that path to try and remember that we are all children of the same God. We all have our own quirks. And if we're too quick to judge those quirks, maybe we need to take a little bit of a look at ourselves and realize that maybe we have more quirks than we think. And we're honestly all trying to do the same thing. And even if we're in a war zone, which I believe we are, right?
Yeah.
Definitely spiritually, and other ways that having that boot camp mentality, enduring that, understanding that we as human beings, as brothers and sisters, are really all trying to get to the same place. Now, there is true evil. I believe in that. And there are some individuals that counter that, but I believe they're the exceptions. Now, at the same time, I'm not naive to the risks and the danger that I was in. There were some hairy times. There was some near misses. There was some explosions that are tense moments. And there's so many warriors that had much more intense moments as far as war violence goes than me, but it got me through it. And I was calm the whole time. And at the same time, I have other friends. And I know if I just keep that perspective as I meet new people, I'm in the South, it's different people. If I meet someone who's, very bitter and they're an abrasive person, what is going on in their lives that's created that? And there's some people that still frustrate the heck out of me, and in the moment you're like, man, would I like your wheels to fall off your vehicle
right
on the way home from work. And that sounds bad, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you get, and I think if anything, that helps you become a better leader to try and keep that perspective.
Yeah.
That, everyone's trying and everyone wants their family to turn out better than them. So.
Yeah.
So everyone is dealing. How do you deal? How do you deal today with the trials and challenges? I think that Afghanistan probably helps you put them in perspective of how blessed you are, and really by the grace of God, really that you're born in Spokane and live in the United States, and they were born in Afghanistan and have different trials and different circumstances. But how do you deal with things when life gets hard?
Having that perspective helps. A term we have in the military is adjusting fire. When you're shooting at something and you're missing, if you keep doing that, nothing's going to happen. It's adjusting fire, meaning changing what you're doing and never staying too locked in or too attached to what you're doing, and keeping that boot camp mentality, keeping it not just for your spiritual self, but the physical, the emotional, all the aspects of what makes us human keeps that going. I think one of the books that made a huge impact on me, I would say a non-spiritual book, was by Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership. I don't know if both of you have read that book.
I have not read it, but you're not the first person that's recommended that to us.
Yeah, so he's a retired Navy SEAL, and it's a fun book to read because he has certain principles of extreme ownership. And he starts out with a war story in Iraq. And then he talks about the principle. And then he goes into the application to business, which really, to business, it can be for religious leaders, for parents at home. It all applies. You know, as a time on a lower rank where in every rank I've gotten to, I think, okay, I've mastered a lot of leadership. And then I learned I have a long way to go. And it's not fun to learn that you're short in something.
Yeah.
You know, and because of that, I'm sure there's a lot of chiefs, senior chiefs, master chiefs, other military members and junior officers that have been extremely frustrated with me. But those same people are the ones that have helped me to grow. And what I learned from that book, especially, it helped tie it together for me, is every challenge I have, I need to look as a good thing. You know, if it's rough, good. That's the only way it can make me better. And if I have a rough boss, hey, I need to lead up. I need to help shape his or her understanding, even if it takes me a couple of years, right? But never quit mentality to just fire. The example he has in one of his podcasts I love, it's about controlling the weather. I give full credit to him on this. So as Navy SEALs, they go on a lot of missions to go kill a bad guy, right? That's hard to get.
Objectives, right?
Yes.
Objectives.
And a lot of times they call it an insertion, right? So they'll go by rotary wing or helicopter. They'll go and do the mission and then get out of there. And he said often, and you see it a lot in theater, missions will be scrubbed because of bad weather, right? There's certain weather you just can't fly. Mm-hmm. And he says that's a common thing. And then if you tell your boss, hey, bad weather, sorry, boss, I got to tank the mission. They're like, okay. But everyone's still down because that timing of that mission still was very intentional. You had a window to get that objective, and now it's gone because of weather. But he brings up the point that as a leader, if you take that and say, wait, how can I don't want weather to control me. How can I make this better? Well, hang on. Is there a way that maybe days before I insert them, they hang low, go do the mission, even if there's bad weather, and then we extract them afterwards? That way we're controlling the weather by not letting it control us. And that mentality is always in the back of my mind. Whenever I'm about to give an excuse in my mind, I think of that. Whether it's trying to work through a spiritual struggle I have, physical struggle, emotional struggle, some fatherhood, you know, being a husband or a citizen of our country and world, I learned I can't stop adjusting fire until I get it right. And then I need to be ready to meet the next obstacles because they are always going to happen. And that sets my expectations to one, no, I'm going to have more obstacles. I'm going to learn about ways that I am not being a good leader that I need to adjust. Lastly, hey, that bootcamp mentality, I know at the end, it's going to turn out great, despite the pain I'm going through now. And because of that, really, what I've become, even though I'm this normal guy, all my successes, there's so many people in the military, out of the military. Tyler, you're definitely one of them, that have affected me and who I am. And even if I appear to not be listening, like my wife can attest to happens sometimes, I am listening, I am taking notes, and I internalize things probably to a fault at times. I am learning always. And and I'll make big mistakes. And every tour I am in the military, I'm learning. I just have to be open to hearing what people want to say to me, even if it's the hardest thing. And so that cycle of things that I go through really is right now the way I am trying to do it.
Oh, I love what you just talked about, because I feel like the principles that you just talked about is sort of a master class in getting through hard things. I love that. I'm curious, you mentioned, the people that have had an impact in your life, and, we're big on this podcast about honoring people, and you've talked about some of those important people in your life. Is there anyone that you'd like to take some of this space and honor on this podcast?
There's those people I know but don't know me. And there's those people that I know that know me, right? So George Washington has been one of my heroes. He had all the power in the world at his hands, and he went from swords to plowshares. We all know who he is. This is definitely not in order. I'm going to save the best for last. But in Hollywood, it's hard to find someone you look up to because of all the things that happen there. You guys know who John Krasinski is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you familiar with the YouTube channel, Some Good News, that he started?
Yeah, Some Good News.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. What an authentic, awesome guy. So I love and appreciate a lot of actors. My wife, for some reason, thinks I have a man crush on Tom Cruise. I love almost all the movies he's in. But I have no desire to ever meet the guy. And I'm not trying to talk bad about something, but I just don't have the desire to meet him. But that's one guy. Another guy going to the Seahawks is Bobby Wagner. Have you ever seen Bobby Wagner, linebacker for the Seahawks, after a game? He is exhausted. That guy puts his heart and soul. Nice guy. He spends as much time as he can giving back to the fans. And it's authentic. Just a great guy, great heart. My dad is definitely on the list. That guy's been through a lot. And he has just been a rock. With some of the side effects from a stroke, there's times where he gets tired easily. But because they're subtle, you can easily think that guy is lazy, even in his younger years. But it's one of the side effects. He's just a rock. Always been a great example. Other folks that probably don't know, a guy I grew up with in Spokane, Ryan McIntyre, just one of those great guys. Steady, had every reason to not follow the path he followed. He's an airline pilot. My best wartime buddy, spent a lot of time in Afghanistan together, sometimes apart, but in the same country. But Kory Ross, I don't know if he wants me to mention his name or not, but great guy. He's been through some stuff in his life, and he is one of those diamonds in the rough, per se. And I respect the guy a lot. And he'll be my friend now and through the eternities. Retired Marine. There's a lot of others that I could mention here, but I think we'll top it off with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I don't know sometimes why he keeps believing in me. I'm a struggler. I feel like I always have a lot more to work on than I can figure out how to work on. And I go through ups and downs, and he's always there. I hope I can show my appreciation for what he's done by trying to stay on the right path. I know I said I'd save the best for last, and that was, but my wife, man, has she been through hell. She is a deployment queen. And recently I was deployed to the Horn of Africa just after COVID started. And she and many of the other spouses she talks to have agreed that was probably the hardest deployment. Kids were not in school. She just started an online degree for dietetics, and it was about survival. And I was deployed overseas, and I was not bored. and it's during COVID and all the stressors. So she's been through a lot. She's handled it with grace. I think more and more military spouses will find out that she is a great mentor. She's been through that. We've also experienced time in the hospital with our kids. I won't go into the medical stuff that we've dealt with, but that's been a whole trial. And so all those things together, what a rock she's been, what a support. She is definitely high on that list of, I could not have had the successes I've had in the military without her.
I love that. I love that list, Kory, and I appreciate you going through that list. I think it's important to kind of to be able to see people, and I love how you talked about people that you don't know and don't know you, but yet they had an impact. I think that's a big deal. I appreciate you doing that. What gives you, with all of the experiences that you've had in life as a young boy, in Afghanistan, in Chile, what gives you hope these days?
I would say, my kids definitely give me hope. It's watching them grow up is just a miracle in and of itself, and seeing some of the examples they're already setting for me. Tyler, you can attest to that one birthday party Braxton had where we met at the park, and Braxton wanted, what was he, 9, 10? His birthday that he wanted was for us to go to a park there in Chula Vista, and he wanted everyone for the present to bring assigned packs to put in to go to refugees, these kits, hygiene kits for refugees. That was the birthday present he wanted at 9 or 10.
Who does that?
It's amazing.
I would not have done that. Man, I would have wanted the latest G.I. Joe toys,
right?
Something like that, or a brand new bike, or I don't know, and just things like that. I'm like, wow,
yeah,
do that. Another thing that gives me hope is reflecting on the youth in Afghanistan. They had even expressed to me, we just need to wait out these old farts. We'll get there, but we want to be there. We want to be successful. And any of the youth today, it's so amazing to see, and the things they deal with.
Yeah,
I cannot imagine how distracted I would have been in school having a smartphone.
yeah,
and it's really hard for me to give the kids a phone, but there's benefits to it also. But they give me that. And then definitely the BYU joining the Big 12 helped. Not the Seattle Mariners anytime soon. But my wife, she gives me hope. We've been able to mostly balance out highs and lows with each other to help lift each other up, but she definitely does.
It's crazy. So we've been talking for a couple hours, and we've covered a lot of stuff, Mike.
I got a page full of notes, brother.
Yeah, right. We've covered stuff, and I'm just, I love the journey, and here's the cool thing. And maybe this is cool, maybe this isn't, but I think it's cool, so I'll tell you about it. This stuff that's recorded here, these conversations are pretty forever. Throw them out on the interwebs and they're just floating out there, right? But I'm excited for one day when Braxton and Alexa and Fletcher and Kaylee all listen to this with their kids and can hear the things that made Dad who he was. And that's the beautiful thing about life, right? Life is messy, life is dirty, life, it kicks our tail more often than not. And yet we can still find beauty in that. We can still find the blessings that come from those things. And man, I am grateful for the 2 hours to be able to talk to you tonight and hear your journey and give me some things, that Mike showed his notebook. There's things that I've written down that I want to do differently. And I'm grateful for that, Kory. I do appreciate that. It's huge.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that. I'm thinking of that adjust fire, right?
I love that. Yeah. I love that. But
it's been helpful to me too. I mean, I went through your notes to help prepare me for this, and a lot of good self-reflecting, and also, I like you said, and It's a Wonderful Life, which has been one of my favorite movies that I look forward to watching at Christmas time. Is, I have been truly blessed, and without deserving it.
Well, let me ask you this, Kory Angelsey, because we end every episode of The Richest Men in Town with the same question. And it all has to do with that moment of George Bailey standing in his house with a group of people that want to arrest him, and life is chaos, and income flooding the people to sort of bail him out. And his brother walks in and raises his glass in a toast and says, "To my big brother George, the richest man in town." I mean, the irony is thick there, but the message is beautiful. And so we ask you the same question that we've asked all of our guests, Kory. What does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town?
Are you guys willing to be a little vulnerable?
Yeah, amen. Mike is
Absolutely.
lining up.
Okay.
We're ready.
So I came prepared to answer a different question, because in the notes it said, "What does it mean to you to be the richest woman in town?"
Oh,
So I have a different answer prepared, but I'll adjust fire.
okay, well, good. Today's day and age, we're
You got to change that template.
So I'll adjust fire in my response, because there's a very different response. But to me, to be the richest man in town is for my kids to turn out better than I am. And for that matter, anyone that I can serve in my lifetime, for me to help them to just be a little bit better, which is hard with all the imperfections that I look at in the mirror, to know that I'm capable of, but I pray that I can. And not just turn out better than I am, but to be able to stand on their own feet, to own their own convictions, and stick with them.
I love that. I love that answer. And Mike and I always we kind of marvel at that question, because in 70 plus episodes, Mike, we have yet to hear the same words uttered in those answers. But yet there's similarities in all of those answers. And if there's one thing that it's you mentioned, I look in the mirror and I see all these imperfections, but isn't that what makes us the dynamic and impactful people that we can be? Is that we have those things that push us, that prepare us to make changes. And I'm grateful for the time that we've had to spend with you tonight, Kory. I'm grateful for your journey. I'm grateful for those things that you think are imperfections, because those are the things that make you who you are, that allow me to learn from you. And I just appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Hey, Kory, I don't know if this is going to do anything for you, but because I'm a former Spanish teacher, right? I don't know what the battlefield looks like. I don't know. I thank you for your service. I can only imagine what's going through your heart these days as you look at the world. And I just want to squash any concerns or any feelings that service rendered where you've been went for nothing, right? And
So it is really easy in a temporal lens to be full of bitterness right now. I am 100% confident that many of those who I called friends have been murdered in the last few months. Again, this is knowing what I know. There is someone who is way more powerful than the Taliban can ever hope to be. And that is our Savior, Jesus Christ. And if it takes his arm to do it, they will be rescued. And God will make everything right. And that's what gets me through it.
Yeah, I think that is such a powerful that's a powerful statement of faith. That's a powerful proclamation. I just think anytime we keep our covenants, right, and we're standing in these holy places, building relationships of trust, those things will echo. They'll echo for generations, and they'll echo into eternity. You know, and that rising generation is watching you, right? Those people want to have that experience, and they want to have the hope that they see in you. And those things can break down. Those things can break down borders and barriers, and who knows what will come, right? We know what's coming. We know he's coming, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's just so valuable for you to share your experiences, what you can, right? I mean, there's obviously limitations with what you can talk about. There's obviously limitations with the time that we have, but thank you for coming and talking to us a little bit about Spokane, right? A little bit about Afghanistan, and a little bit about dating online and all of the things. It's a tapestry.
Absolutely.
Right. And I love this thought of a tapestry of your life, because if you look at a tapestry, if you look at the back, it's kind of a mess, right? There's strings and there's stuff. But when you turn it around and you look and you get to see the life that you're living, it's truly a rich life. And thank you so much for your service. Thank you for being like your dad, being like your mom, right? When the chips are down, I'm going to keep my promises, and I'm going to be true to the things that I know to be right. So I love that. And that gives me hope. That gives me hope that, you know what, this world's a small place. And if we can be disciples wherever we are, amazing things are going to happen. So thank you. Thank you for that. And go Hawks.
Thank you. Go Hawks.
It's been fun, man. We've loved every minute of it. Thanks for being here tonight. Hey, make sure you tell Tiffany and the kids we appreciate the sacrifice that they made to let you in here to talk to us. And we appreciate you for sacrificing your live viewing of the Seahawks tonight. So, so thanks, Kory. Have a good night, and we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother, George, the richest man in town.